Welcome everyone. My name is Kristen Ferguson, Chair of the Concord Planning Board. I'm calling this public meeting to order at 7:03 p.m. In accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order of March 12, 2020, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, we're conducting this meeting virtually, and this meeting is being recorded. We all understand the challenges of holding a virtual public meeting, and you think we're getting better at it every week, but as I can tell you from the first day of Concord Public Schools, they're still working on things, and we are too. So we'll do our best to make this as inclusive as possible. We want to make sure we hear from the public. For each item on the agenda, applicants will be promoted to panelists, and they're going to be provided video and audio access so that they can give a presentation. The public is invited to view that presentation, but will not be permitted audio or video access until we ask for public comment and on that particular agenda item. And then when you have public comment, you can raise your hand in the Zoom meeting. I'll call on you and we'll promote you to panelists so that we can see your video and hear your audio, and we'll ask you to state your name and address for the record. If you're participating by the phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand and be provided audio access that way. So if you type in the Q&A, we will try to watch that as well, but the best way to be seen and heard would really be through that raising hand function, so we can call on you. We have several people who are watching that, so we'll be sure to get everyone. At this time, I'm going to do a roll call for our planning board members. So we've got Ms. Orbital. You might need to unmute.
Here.
And Mr. Flint.
Here.
And Mr. Johnson.
Present.
Mr. Bozdett.
Here.
Ms. McEnany.
Here.
And that's everybody I see so far. So perhaps Mr. Saya will be joining us shortly. And before we get started, I just wanted to thank Matt. It's your last meeting with us, correct? Before,
that's it.
You go on to different, and perhaps better things, but different things.
No, not better.
Right. So thank you very much for working with this board for so long and everything you've brought to it. And we look forward to you contributing tonight as well. I'm sure you will. So thank you, Matt.
Well, thanks. You're setting me off with a doozy. And
right? Aren't you glad you didn't miss tonight?
Yeah.
So as Matt mentioned, full agenda for tonight. So we're going to ask folks to make sure that we all try to make our points concisely. The first item is going to be our public hearing. I'm going to open the public hearing in accordance with provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81T, and the Town of Concord Subdivision Rules and Regulations to review the definitive subdivision plan application of Symes Development and Permitting, LLC, for a 16-lot subdivision of land at 11B, 146B, and 1442 Main Street and 110 Highland Street. And those are parcels 2407, 2408, 2409, and 2409-1. And we are going to be hearing from the applicant. Well, after the applicant presents, the board is going to ask any questions of the applicant. Then we have another presentation that was requested from the public. We'll open that up, and then we'll take the remainder of public comment. So we can go ahead and open that up to the applicant to begin the presentation, please. I think we're working on that behind the scenes.
Okay, turning it over to the applicant is Jeff Ruda, Rich Harrington, and Brad Latham.
Can you hear me? Great. Yes. Good evening, Rich Harrington, engineer from Williams in Spargus. What we have here tonight is our definitive plan set, and we are still awaiting comments from the engineering department, which was a majority of the comments that a definitive plan has. received comments back from the Water and Sewer Department, and we can comply with all their concerns. We're looping the water main, and they cannot approve their plan until we receive approval from this board. So we reviewed that with Elizabeth via email, and we sent back our comments.
Rich,
Yes.
I'm gonna jump in. I think you need to actually give a presentation of the plan to the board so that they have an understanding of the project, and then we can go into comments and questions.
Okay. Is my screen shared? You can see the plan set?
Nope, my screen is shared. So Kristen, let me know if you can.
I can see the plan.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Rich.
I'm having difficulties here for a second. Okay, the plans. I think I see it. Okay, I see it now. Thank you. We have 12 sheets in the definitive plan set, which is an upgrade from the 4 plans that you saw earlier with the preliminary plan. As you can see from Main Street, we have Road A coming in with a cul-de-sac, and then off to the right, we have Road B heading towards Highland Street. We have 2 existing houses on the property, which are just below Road B. The shaded frontages for those 2 houses extend, one down to Main Street to the right of Road A entrance and one onto Highland Street. We're going to remove those 2 houses, and then those 2 front shaded areas along Main and Highland are going to just become frontage lots, which are not part of this subdivision. Next page, please. This is our lot layout plan, which you'll see each number of each lot is circled with, has a number in a circle. So on the left-hand side of Road A, you'll see 1 going in a clockwise direction around through lot 16. This shows each lot that will be conveyed to individual owners. And each lot complies with zoning as far as frontage and lot area. We have 10,000 square feet for that. In addition, there's grading easements at the entrance of Road A on the left and right of the frontage lots to help assist the shoulder grading. And this layout is in full compliance with the subdivision rules and regulations, being 50-foot wide and having a turnaround at the end in compliance with your cul-de-sac table. At the top of the page, you'll see that to the top right, there's a Wetlands Conservancy District. We have flagged those wetlands. Those wetlands are isolated, and they are a federal wetland, and I'll comment about that further. This plan also shows drainage easements at the end of each cul-de-sac that are associated with part of the stormwater system. And then also it shows an easement from the cul-de-sac circle of Road B over to Highland Street to loop the water main. Next page, please. This is your plan and profile of Road A, which we rotated the road at the top. That's a plan view, 90 degrees. And at the bottom is your profile. So basically what we're showing is as we enter the site, we're going down an elevation of only a 2% grade. And then we're dropping down less than 7% grade and then leveling out at the bottom and turning around through the cul-de-sac. This meets the requirements of your table for this residency district, and it requires a cut volume, which is the existing contours are dashed, the existing elevations are dashed along the profile at the bottom. This also shows the catch basins and drainage structures and the upgrade of a little more detail within the cul-de-sac island of the subsurface recharge area for Road A. To the right, we'll have the first inch of water goes to the right to the sediment basin at the end of Road A, and then the remainder goes into underneath the cul-de-sac island with an overflow. Next page, please. This is sheet 4, which is the second plan and profile for Road B. Again, at the bottom, you'll see the profile where, as you go left to right, we're level at the entrance, and then we just basically down 5% and up 5% around the cul-de-sac to properly grade that. And in a similar fashion, at the top of the page, we have a sediment basin to divert the dirty water of the first inch to that hole in the ground, and then there's a structure that sends the rest of it below the cul-de-sac island. You'll see that, again, throughout the plans, you'll have a number with a circle, which designates the lot number as you look at each plan. And then you'll see that each house has a different shape. They're illustrative house boxes, which shows 2 parking spaces coming off and driveways off each road. And on the right, you'll see a typical roadway section, which shows the width of the pavement, the sidewalk, and the grass shoulders, and the 50-foot right-of-way, all in full compliance with your regulations. Next page, please. This is our grading plan. And again, this is no different than the grading that you saw on the preliminary plan, which was approved by your board, minus some minor adjustments for the catch basin in each cul-de-sac area. So as we cut down the road, we're beginning at Main Street at about 156, and we're down at the end about 126, down at the top of the page. To your left, where lots 1 through 5 are, there'll be some grading cut back behind the houses in addition to the road construction. And then there'll be a fill at the top in lots 6 through 11. There'll be fill kept on the site. And then as you grade the road per the profiles we just saw, there'll be additional cut for lots 12 through 16 to build each house lot with septic system on each site. At the top of the page, you'll see that there's a edge of wetland and a dark dash line. That's our limit of work. We are allowed to fill up to 5,000 square feet of the isolated wetland, which we are proposing. And it is a general permit with the Army Corps. It is a federal wetland, and there's a self-notification form that the applicant has already submitted when we had the cluster for this project. So we already have a file number with them, and all we have to do is just update them with the final plans before construction. Next page, please. This is basically the utility plan. It makes it a little bit of a cleaner picture where you can see the illustrative house boxes on each lot to comply with the zoning setbacks, the drainage system, the street trees that are spaced out and uniform on each side of the right-of-way. And then we have underground utilities with the G for the gas, E for underground electrical coming off a utility pole in Main Street. And then we see the catch basins and drain structures for the road, which engineering will comment on. And then we're looping the water main from the Road B cul-de-sac back up to Highland Street to the right of A1. Next, please. We're getting into the detail sheets now. Every detail on this comes from your own town stormwater bylaw regulations and details, except for the top right where there's a typical roof recharge system. A majority of the lots will recharge the roof runoff into the front or the side yards of each house on their own lot, in addition to having a septic system on each lot with town water. Next, please. Again, carrying through sheet 8 detail sheet, additional details from your regulations at the Public Works building relative to sidewalk curb cuts. We are providing a sidewalk down one side of the road, so we'll have a selection of the appropriate handicap ramps, etc., for full compliance for the sidewalk through and down to the end of the cul-de-sac. Next, please. This is the details for the subsurface stormwater within each cul-de-sac island, subsurface chambers and overflow criteria and inspection ports. Next, please. This is a list of all the soil test pits that we've done so far within the stormwater areas and across the site over the last couple of years. The assistant town engineer has been on the site with us to observe the test pits within the stormwater areas associated with the road. And we've also had multiple dates so far with the Board of Health for the individual lots with their septic system areas and roof dry wells. Thank you. Next. Erosion and sedimentation control plans. This is the stormwater pollution plan. just designates a limit of work, the siltation controls. At the bottom of the page, at the beginning of Road A, you'll have a temporary construction entrance, which will be basically a driveway of gravel to maintain sediment off of the public road. On the left-hand side where the cut slope is along Center Village, you'll have a limit of work and some slope stabilization. And then in the back top right, you'll have a combination of sediment basins and soil stockpile areas and a limit of work line with additional controls. Next, please. And this again, sheet 12 is again, multiple details pulled from your regulations and put on the plan to allow us to properly provide protection from erosion and revegetation during development. And it's all uniform, just like any other project across the town. We're no different. We comply with the same regulations that everyone else does. And that's the entire plan set. And what we have is, we have a planner's report that we received, and we've also have, we're awaiting some comments from the Public Works on their review of our stormwater report. And so with that, there will be a continuation to this hearing. So what I'd like to do is to allow the board to ask me any questions or the applicant any questions. Again, it's a plan that's in full compliance with your regulations. It's a conventional system and without waivers, and it's been approved by your board previously on a preliminary plan level. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are going to open it up to the board for comments and questions for the applicant before we have a presentation from the public, and then open it up for additional public comment that isn't covered. As we heard from Elizabeth when she sent out the planner's report, and really thank you very much for putting that together on such short notice. I think we need to definitely work with our applicants and everybody to make sure that we have more time to prepare full reports and before the board reviews it, and then we have the applicant back in. So as mentioned, we're waiting for comments from the town engineering staff, and so we are going to discuss what we have before us so far. And just to clarify, I believe that we approved the preliminary subdivision plan, but that doesn't necessarily have bearing on the definitive plan, right? That's when we did the preliminary, we weren't looking at all of the rules and regulations, and now we are. Is that correct? Okay. So just, you know, for the board's confirmation, in order to approve this, all of the sections of our town's rules and regulations have to be met. So let me open it up to the board and see what questions you have about the presentation of the plan set right here, or the planner's report that has kind of the preliminary take on this so far.
Kristen, I've got some questions. I'll run through some quick things because I know we have short time, but and end on focusing on a big thing. It's interesting to hear that there is a federal wetland back there, but I think in the application it said that there was no significant wildlife areas, so that wasn't addressed in the application. So I'd like to see that addressed. As a town planner noted, the traffic report that was done for the prior project, I don't think is carries over. We've got additional driveways which will be immediately adjacent. It's a different type of development, so I'd like to see a new traffic report. I also think the answer on the cost of the development to the town isn't really quite answering the question that's in the bylaw, which you provided what would be the revenue to the town, but you said that it would be, the cost would be better on comparison to the typical single family. But I assume that these would be large multi-bedroom homes, given the price point disclosed in that calculation, and based upon what sells in that neighborhood near the train tracks. And you said no waiver, so you're not, I assume that means no request for a waiver from the set aside for affordable housing. And if that's different, let me know. Now the big question is the earth removal, right? I spent a lot of time looking for any comparable subdivisions that involved 60,000 cubic yards plus of earth removal. to educate myself on how the planning board should consider that, since earth removal, I mean, the permit is for the zoning board, but it does play into, I think, consideration as to whether this is unsuitable land under, what is it, 622 of the subdivision bylaws. And in determining suitability, I looked first at 673, which said the road should conform as much as possible with the existing topography. Though no excessive slope should be allowed. I think you said yours is just under 7, and then the fire department said it needs to be under 7. So it looks like you've established that with the road, but it's clear you're completely having to redo the topography of the site, which suggests it doesn't follow the existing topography as closely as possible. Also, I note that there's no provision for the preservation of any of the mature trees, which is obvious because the entire site's being regraded. And the subdivision bylaws do talk about preserving natural features such as mature trees. So that's defeated as well. Ultimately, we'd be looking for a very, I think, thorough delineation of what the mitigation would be to address the points raised in 622 to make the topography suitable. I think about 60,000 cubic yards, that's about, by envelope calculation, 6,000 dump trucks. That's about, what, a dump truck every 10 minutes for about 5 months during working days. You're a block and a half from one of the primary crosswalks to our elementary school in the neighborhood. You're going to have dust issues. You're going to have noise issues. I've already heard from 4 neighbors in the immediate area who have had issues with idling trucks at 6:30 in the morning on the existing sites being dug out. So I would like to see mitigation, but frankly, the 60,000 cubic yards is so unprecedented, and it's essentially a mine in a residential area, right? And we know that the site used to be, in fact, a sand quarry or sand pit, or I believe I was told that when I did the site visit some 2 years ago, and that's why it's got the unusual topography. You're essentially completing that job. I mean, this is like commercial level earth removal, as if you were mining it for sand. It also raises questions, just given the vast removal, and we know that this is good soil for drainage, but that's aquifer ground. Does that affect the drainage on existing properties? The water flows through this property. I think that needs to be taken into consideration, again, just because of the vast amount of soil being removed. But mostly I'm worried about the near-term, short-term impacts on the neighborhood, given just the number of trucks, the traffic issues, the dirt, the noise, the dust. I would expect to see a traffic plan with police on the street, both limiting idling, limiting the time of day that the trucks can go, entering and exiting. I'd expect to see water sprayed on the site during excavation. I'd want to see a very comprehensive plan, but even with that, I don't know that that can overcome the request here to build on what I would argue, just based upon the topography of plan 3 you showed, in how much you've got to change the topography to make the road meet the grade requirements. It's unsuitable. That's my view. Kristen, that's it.
Thanks, Burton. I think those were really important points for us to consider. And so just making sure that, the board has those rules and regs in front of them. And the couple of main points that I heard you refer to were section 6.6.2. Let me just make sure I have that correct here.
6.22 is a provision that delineates what would constitute unsuitable land. So it's obviously within our purview to consider that. 6.7.3 is the other section that talks about topography.
Thank you.
That the road should comply with topography. Yeah.
Thanks. So 6.2.1, protection of natural features. 6.2.2, unsuitable land. And then he was talking about the roadway. So thanks for bringing those points to our attention, because I think that's certainly what we had questioned about the site as well. Kate, you had your hand up, or would you like to weigh in, please?
Yeah, can we just review the procedure again? So,
So tonight we're going to
Are
ask
we
the applicant questions about what we have so far. We don't have the full report back from the town committees, particularly the engineering staff, so we need more information. Then we would plan to hear from the public before continuing this public hearing so that we can deliberate at a later time. Our deadline is to file before August 14th, or no, October 14th. So we definitely have time to ask questions and consider things.
and the plans aren't posted under this for today's meeting on the website. Is that true? Like, I don't think anyone on the phone, do people on the phone who are attending because the meeting was noticed for today, did they have access to either the draft plan or, sorry, the planner's report from Elizabeth or the current set of plans that Rich just provided?
Plans are on their website.
The planning board website?
Yeah, under current meeting documents, but the planner's report, I doubt, has been distributed publicly yet.
That was late breaking.
The planner's report was posted to the website this afternoon when the board got it, but again, that was the reason
Pretty
for
late. Yeah.
my recommendation that the board just open the public hearing, have a presentation from the applicant, ask your questions, open it up to the public for questions, and then continue this so everybody has time to digest the report, and also we can have engineering division complete their review of the project. Once they complete their review of the project, I will then update the report with the applicable sections for the board's review.
Thanks. Maybe my computer's not loading or something. I don't see. Thank you. I don't know what's wrong with what I'm looking at.
Did you want to ask any other questions from the applicant yet, or do you want to hold your questions for now?
I would like to reserve the right to ask questions at the next continued hearing.
Okay. Other questions from other members? Matt?
Yeah, so I guess I got a few different things. First of all, lots E and F, I guess, are not technically part of the subdivision, though. I mean, Elizabeth made comments that, suggesting that they be added to the scope. I also would note that the driveways that are shown on the plan for lots E and F are very close to Main Street. And it just seems like their orientation just makes them kind of a hazard. So that's just one thing I noted looking at the plan. And it would be relatively easy to swap them to the opposite end of the unit. Second is the cul-de-sacs. So those drainage facilities, I assume they're buried underground, right? And so what ground cover is expected to be on top of this cul-de-sacs? So that's a question. Third is my expectation is that relative to our height measurements for buildings, that a special permit would need to be applied for some of the units. I mean, while I think also Elizabeth points out in her report, it's just hard to tell from the images, but that we had seen in the PRD application that without some alternative treatment, that the buildings would be kind of theoretically impossible to build, according to normal standards without a special permit, a few of them. So I'd be curious about that process in this case. Fourth is Elizabeth mentioned about the building envelopes, and I did see pro forma building envelopes. I guess my question there would be to Elizabeth is that, to me, those pro forma building envelopes seem reasonable. I don't know why they're problematic. So I just want clarification on that. The next, another point covered in Elizabeth's report was road names. We should be having road names here, in particular, since the proposed name of the development is Center in Maine, which itself is somewhat confusing. I I'm pretty sensitive to, hey, what kind of road names can we get to make it clearer that these are unique, this is a unique site. Then the next is really trying to understand more the term adverse topography, excuse me, adverse topography, because it seems to me, I mean, I've been struggling just Googling it to try to find a clear definition. I see lots of references. It's a common term. It seems to me though that what would qualify as adverse topography is any set of grades or in the natural environment that could not be adjusted through grading to meet our minimum standards for street slopes. And so it seems like, if I'm reading that right, this lot just barely does not meet the standard of adverse topography, because it seems like you actually can, with extreme grading, get it to a 7% slope. I think adverse topography is one that even with that kind of, no matter how much you graded it, you could not create a 7% slope. So I really want clarity on that. It's not a term I see defined anywhere, and really it's pretty crucial, I think, to the suitability of the site. Then tree preservation. I was confused a little bit on sheet 11. Seeing the illustration in the top right corner about tree preservation measures that should be taken, when indeed it doesn't seem like there are any trees being preserved. So more clarity about what that's indicating would be good. And then I think this next one is for the board, which is there's a provision to take a reservation of land. And is there a public purpose that would be served by reserving part of the site? And what are the ramifications if we reserve part of the site and we're not specifying grading for those parts that are being preserved? So
we've got a requirement to reserve and then an option to reserve, right?
Right, but this possibility of reservation and the interaction with the grading plan. And then the sidewalks, it seems like the sidewalks are asphalt. So I don't know if that is any consideration. And then also there's a provision that requires sidewalks to be placed fully around a cul-de-sac, and that's not provided for apparently. And then I'd echo the points that Burton made about the cost to the town. I think it's clear that these units, being new units, being marketed to families almost certainly, will probably have a higher load in terms of cost to the town than a median single family home. Now, that said, I also understand that it's very difficult to come up with a rubric. I mean, I guess we could look at the recent sales of homes and survey, but it's pretty hard, I think, to come up with empirical data. It's just my sense that indeed this will be costly in that respect. Thanks.
Thank you. I saw the applicants were taking notes. Can I ask you to comment on both Burton and Matt's questions so far?
Well, I'll respond to one of them, and the rest of them we're going to respond formally in writing. There is no relief needed for height.
What was that, Jeff?
There's no relief needed for height.
No relief needed for height.
Correct.
So to clarify, Matt, when a building permit is requested for each individual lot, they will be required to show, meet those requirements under 6.2, I think it's 6.2.11 of the zoning bylaw, and how it is measured from the two lowest points of existing grade.
I see.
that
So
is-
after the lots have been created, which is after the grading's taken place.
No. It's from existing, it's from
Yeah,
existing grade, not.
yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we studied that at length. There's maybe half a dozen lots where we're gonna be stuck with like 26 feet. But we can deal with that. So we don't need any relief like we need. With the PRD, the board was looking to reduce the cut. And as a result, we lifted up the back, which shrunk, as you can imagine, killed the height. But we're not doing that here. We understood we were not going to get any relief. So we've done everything so we don't need any.
So I will clarify it. That will be up to the building commissioner.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, the ultimate siting of the units and everything. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Kristen, I just have one more question or point for consideration is it's not being somebody who reads plans all the time. I'm looking at the slope next to the property adjoining to the west, I guess west southwest, where there's going to be a big cut there, and it looks like some pretty tight topo lines. I presume that those are, that is a slope that's permissible. I'm just wondering if there would be any issues of subsistence would play into that, given how steep that is, and it appears to go right up to the fence, the existing property line there. And just if you could give us a sense of how many feet that's dropping off and what that slope is, that would be very helpful.
We'll do so in writing.
So did you say you'd like to reply to all of the other comments in writing?
Yes.
Okay. Other board members want to weigh in for any clarification from the questions we've already asked or additional things for the applicant to bring to us next time? And I will say there was a question written in about that the impression was that there was going to be a park built in the subdivision. What happened to that? And so to clarify the process, this is for a subdivision. The park that was mentioned was for a planned residential development, a PRD application that ended up not going through. So this is a kind of a different project, if you will. And the applicant is, as you can see, has divided the lots equally, and there is not in the plans that I see a park.
So Kristen, just to, for the whole public hearing process, because I am supporting the board and taking notes on this, people are submitting questions and answers. There is no other staff person to be able to answer those questions. So what I would ask is during the public comment period, people hit the raise hand button and we will allow them to ask their question so that it becomes part of the public record. The question and answers that people are typing in the Q&A, I would have to check with the Zoom administrator, but I'm not sure that they get documented as far as being part of the planning board's public hearing minutes. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. So I appreciate the updated documentation from the applicant. I echo what I've heard from Mr. Flint and Mr. Johnson in terms of those specific concerns that they've raised. I guess I'm wondering why there has not been a special permit application for earth removal. Is that something that you can answer now? I think you gave us the impression that the project would not require any special permits or waivers.
For the subdivision, the earth removal permit is not part of the subdivision process.
Okay. All right.
Kristen,
And
I had that same question as I was reviewing the materials, and the special permit goes to the ZBA, but the earth removal comes into play just in the section. Well, it's part of the application, interestingly, but it also, I think, comes into play in informing the various questions in section 6 in terms of the site evaluation and how earth removal would or would not play into considering those factors.
I absolutely agree. I'm just kind of thinking about the process and why this site didn't require any waivers. That surprises me based on kind of the extensive changes that need to take place to attempt to make it work.
I could add to that. When we did the cluster, it was one permit application, which was all under the ZBA with a recommendation from the planning board. You're handling the conventional subdivision application to create the road and the lot frontage. And then we'll be filing the application for the earth removal with the ZBA. We delayed that because it gets pushed off because of the planning board process. So they're two separate applications, as before it was just one application. That's why it was together before. It's separate today.
But in fairness to Mr. Flint's request, we will fully demonstrate how the earth removal will take place, the number of trucks, the mitigation, and everything you asked about. That'll be done before the next meeting.
Absolutely, yes.
There we go. All right, well, thank you. We do have a brief presentation from the public who had requested, some abutters who had requested to present, and then we will open it up to public comment. And again, we are going to hear from the public and then plan to continue this public hearing so that we can continue our deliberation at the next time. So Elizabeth, if you can queue up the presentation, she's going to run the slides. And we will also promote to presenters the folks who are going to present. When you start, I'd ask that you say your name and address for the record. And also, I did take a look at your slides briefly, and you've got some detailed calculations in there. I would ask that, because we want to hear all of the points that you have in the presentation, and it's about 20 or so slides, I'd ask that you can please take no more than about 12 or 13 minutes if you can, and that way we leave it open for other public comment, which we might not have heard yet. Is that something that you think you can wrap up by about 7:58 or so?
Absolutely. We timed it in at about 10 minutes.
Perfect. Okay, so I think if you can see the screens, let me give you the floor to introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Jack Madigan. I live at 215 Prairie Street, and I'm speaking on behalf of a diverse group of neighbors and Concord residents who oppose the definitive subdivision center in Maine. Next slide. Okay. In 2011, the Concord Select Board approved 4 sustainability principles to guide the town's decision-making in creating a more sustainable Concord. Town departments, boards, and committees are charged to consider the sustainability principles in their deliberations and decision-making. And you can see one of the ones that we have highlighted there is reduce encroachment on nature. Next slide. Envision Concord Bridge to 2030 took this even further. That was adopted in 2018 and accepted by the Select Board also. The plan specifically identifies the promotion of sustainability and minimizing our impact on the natural environment. The plan's big idea number 2 is to provide more housing choices consistent with sustainability principles. And the next slide, please. Thank you. Sustainable Concord is a roadmap to meet the commitments the Concord community made in 2017 and 18 at the annual town meetings to reduce GHG emissions by 80% and by 2050 in alignment with the Paris Climate Accord and the 2008 Massachusetts Global Warming Solutions Act, and to prioritize climate resilience goals and initiatives. And here we've highlighted some of those that the town is seeking. One, of course, is tree canopy, which of course would be lacking in this current plan. Next slide. Okay, the town's municipal vulnerability preparedness program identifies at the highest priority action and top recommendations that our community promote low impact development. Next slide, please. So if we were to look at some of the developments that are currently being done in Concord, such as hidden trails, you can see this aerial photograph shows what the impact is. That is basically clear cutting, okay? Which is what is being proposed for this site also. Okay, next slide. This is not considered a low impact, okay? It's very much disruptive to both the environment, the ground, and then literally all the neighbors around. The next slide, please. Okay, this ambitious plan to build the proposed large-scale development on the last significant piece of treed property in West Concord. Okay, this property is centrally located, as we have everyone's done pretty much site visits to this property. We've all seen where it is. It's right on 62, right on Main Street as you enter coming up the hill from Damon Mill. And it's right there, and it used to be a previously wooded property. Now your eyes are immediately diverted there due to the just 2 lots being developed thus far. There's only 2 trees that remain on that whole front property. Next slide, please. So this one here would not be considered low impact either, which is what the town has voted on, agreed to, and asked for from our boards and elected officials in terms of how to impact the town positively and environmentally and sustainability. Next slide. The Nature Conservancy has just come out with a new mapping software that they have put in a bunch of different set of maps that help to identify, and you can go through, and it takes a nature-based solutions to address and look at the different thing. You're able to connect the layers so that you can actually look at different things where conservation and restoration can help us combat droughts, such as the one we are experiencing now. Okay, so the next slide is using their software, Nature Conservancy, and looking at where Conserve for drought resilience, and you see that the circle in the very center there, that's the 1440 site. As one of the largest pieces of undeveloped land in West Concord, okay, it's really useful during a drought resilience, where we're actually able to store water in the ground as we're, and help guard against drought risks for not just that one area, but from a lot of West Concord. The next slide, this shows where a drought hazard, which would be more likely for a drought risk. And of course, that area is totally right in it, as is most of West Concord. The next page. So basically the adverse effects are loss of the mature trees really hurts our canopy absorption, wildlife, drainage, and drought. It increases emissions with no offset for the town, and the impact on quality of life for neighbors and abutters. Okay, the benefits are the tax benefits, okay, of having these new homes in there. But I really believe that the cost to the town and to that piece of property from a natural standpoint is huge. And we really need to consider this a lot more. We have to really kind of think about this a little bit more than we are currently. And I do appreciate the board's comments on a lot of these things. I feel like a lot of this I'm hitting on, again, things that they have personally selected also. I'm going to turn it over right now to Scott Richardson. Next slide, please. Oh, tree removal, that one. Okay, nope. Previous one, sorry. Scott, are you on? Oh. Okay, if he is not on, then I will continue. I'm sorry. The economic benefits of the trees that will be destroyed if this development is approved. Using the town's own valuation of tree and at our best estimate of the number of trees removed, the economic loss is $314,000 per year, which comes out to be over $3 million over 10 years.
Hi, Jack, I'm here.
Oh, you are there. I'm sorry, Scott. We're on page 14. Next slide, please. No, tree removal adverse. There you go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Scott Richardson, 260 Elsinore Street. For pretty much every work day over the past 15 years, I have commuted by bicycle on Route 62 to my office in Maynard. So I pass the 1440 site twice a day. I'd like you to consider the economic value of the trees that will be destroyed if the project moves forward. Using the town of Concord's valuation of a tree and our best estimate of the number of trees removed, the economic loss is $314,000 per year, or over $3 million over a 10-year planning horizon. Next slide, please. Healthy earth sequesters carbon, but excavating and moving earth releases carbon, which combines with oxygen to form CO2. Given the stated volume of earth removal and associated tree stump removal, we estimate the direct impact of earth removal alone to be 7.7 million pounds of CO2. There is no offset for these emissions. Next slide, please. Next slide, go ahead. We're skipping over this, Elizabeth, thank you. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. Very good. Now we want to consider the adverse effects of one specific aspect of removal of the 60,000 cubic yards of earth. Next slide, please. 60,000 cubic yards is a lot of earth. Imagine piling 11.4 yards of earth on top of an entire football field. It's an extraordinary amount. It actually boggles the mind, and it is unprecedented among developments in Concord. Next slide. Earth moving requires fossil fuels and so generates carbon emissions and other pollutants. The emissions from the large scale of this project will impact Rideout Field, where children play, the densely populated neighborhood, and the nearby Thoreau School. Next slide. We can easily quantify one aspect of the earth removal, specifically the trucking of the earth through our town. As you see, we anticipate over 7,300 truck miles in the town of Concord alone. To put things in perspective, that's the equivalent of driving a large diesel truck from Boston to San Francisco, then returning to Boston in that truck, then driving to Chicago. It's a tremendous amount of miles in our community. Next slide, please. Diesel trucks, particularly under load carrying tons and tons of earth, emit large volumes of toxins and pollutants. The total volume of pollution associated with the earth transport in this project is simply staggering. And note, much of the diesel emissions settle nearby. Diesel emissions do not dissipate easily. Next slide. With 2,173 truckloads and using the applicant's previously submitted trucking plan, we will have one truck arriving and one fully loaded truck leaving the site every 10 minutes for 6 hours per day for 60 days. This is for earth only. We don't yet have any information about the trucking of the felled trees, vegetation, and roots. Would you want your children out walking, running, or playing near any of that? Back to Jack for the conclusion, please. Next slide.
Oh, next slide.
There you go.
Thank you. So just in closing, there are 3 points that we just wanted to leave you with. The clear cutting of the property, what they're proposing to do, which is literally re-elevating the entire topography of the site, will severely impact Concord's natural environment, and it's detrimental and injurious to neighbors and the town. The proposed subdivision does not utilize the property's natural environment or elevation, nor does it blend in with the surrounding neighborhoods. We believe that this proposed subdivision is inconsistent with the town's long-range principles, commitments, and development plans, which have been voted on by boards and elected officials in the town for the last 5 years on where we want to go as a town. Thank you very much.
Thank you both for preparing the detailed information and for presenting it, and also for kind of keeping that in a concise way that we could hear everything. We are going to open up to public comment now, and I would imagine many people may feel similarly to what you've heard so far. I'm going to ask, in the interest of time, because we do have another item on the agenda tonight, I'm going to ask that if something has been said that you agree with, you could just let us know you agree rather than repeat, taking this time to repeat. And if you do have a point to make, I'm going to ask you to sum it up as concisely as you can, perhaps in about a minute, so we can hear from as many people as possible. And again, what you're going to do is you're going to use the raise hand function. And then what I'll do is I'll call your name. I do usually need to see your full name to call on you, but I'll do my best if I don't see your full name. You might be able to change it. Please state your name and address, and then you'll, when you are unmuted and able to talk, and then we'll lower your hand. So right now I see 2 hands up, and if you put in the Q&A that you'd like to make a comment, if you would just put your hand up. Now I'm seeing more hands go up. If you would go to the probably where you see the your name for your participants. So now I see plenty of hands up. Okay, so let me start with it looks like Edgar's, GA. And when you're you should be promoted to panelist, and then I can see you now. You should be asked to unmute, and now we can should be able to hear you.
Hi there. Very nice to see you. Sorry about the boy in the background. He lives here. We really appreciate.
Oh, excuse me. Please tell us your name and address for the record.
Sure. My name is Jeff Edgers. I'm at 50 Highland Street, and we directly our street obviously abuts the property. I just had a couple questions. One is the PRD, is that dead? Because what I've been told is that the applicant could refile a PRD of some sort, or you could encourage him to. And the reason I ask this is because, you know, there are some really wonderful things you all negotiated for in the PRD, including the no fossil fuel hookup, a park that would have really been a great.
I'm sorry, he seems to be breaking up on my screen. Did he freeze on anybody else's screen?
Dirt removal.
I heard you. If you want to maybe stop your video and then just do audio, we might be able to hear you better. Because your screen has frozen, so we might need to come back to you. Okay, let me answer that question, and then we will come back to you. Elizabeth, you're muted if you wanted to reply.
So what I will do is we may have to just demote Mr. Edgers and then have him, he may have to rejoin the meeting.
Okay, so we'll ask again, are you able to answer procedurally? I'm not sure that it's relevant to our discussion. We're weighing in on just the subdivision, but are you able to concisely answer if a PRD application could be filed again in the future for this site?
So you are correct. The planning board's purview is only reviewing the definitive subdivision plan. As far as whether the applicant would submit another PRD application, that is purely up to the applicant and the property owner. And so I can't speak to that proposal. That's entirely, out of the jurisdiction of the planning board. The planning board does not have the ability to require somebody to file a different application.
Thank you. Can you promote the next hand I see, which is Peter? And Peter, when you should get something that says you're invited to unmute, and then please state your name and address.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Candace, Peter's wife, Peter Siebert and Candace Nelson. We live at 31 Center Village. And my question, I have two questions. One is similar to the park related question. There was in previous plans a pathway that connected the subdivision to Highland Avenue. And I'm wondering if that, it doesn't appear in these plans. I'm assuming it's been erased, but is it something that could be resurrected? And my second question is related to the square footage of the proposed homes. I'm wondering if they're all, of the same size, if we've got smaller homes, larger homes. What's the vision for the square footage of the homes, and whether they would all have 2-car garages?
Yes, Elizabeth?
So currently the plans do not show any connection from the subdivision roads to Highland. And, that's something that I think the applicant can explore as they answer questions and come back to the board. And as far as the square footage of the homes, that is not something that is reviewed or within the purview of the planning board as part of the subdivision.
Okay.
So yeah, so thanks for the reminder, Elizabeth, for all of us and me included. What the planning board is doing right now in terms of its review and potential approval of a subdivision is we're looking at that it must meet all the rules and regulations of our town subdivision, and that includes the public way and the lots, right, Elizabeth, and meeting all of the rules that apply to that. To those.
Yep. It would be meeting the construction standards for the construction of the road, the utilities, the stormwater drainage, and the creation of the lots on these new roadways. But the one aspect I do know is within the application, it does state very briefly that what is being considered are 4-bedroom dwellings, but there is no square footage discussion as part of the subdivision.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks. Did you finish your question, Ms. Nelson?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next question is next comment from Christina. If you can promote her, and Christina, state your name and address, please, when you are invited to unmute. Are you able to unmute yourself? Do you see a little button to do that? I think.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Christina Scherer, 97 Highland Street. So I am a direct abutter of this site. And I would reiterate many of Burton's comments and questions about the impact to the neighborhood on, with the construction. It's a serious concern. We've been severely impacted just with clearing 2 lots and a 3rd construction site, which had incredible amount of earth moving for 1 home. It took months. It was very disruptive. But I do have a very specific question, and I actually don't know if this is within the purview of the planning board or not, but I'm wondering what actually defines a wildlife corridor, because I can tell you anecdotally that this actually is a wildlife corridor. We have numerous animals coming through, coyotes frequently. We've even had a bear. Some of you may remember that from about 8 years ago. So this is not, clearing all of the forest here is not low impact in any way. We have a lot of animals that breed in there, especially birds. We've had Cooper's hawks. We have red-shouldered hawks currently nesting in those woods. So this is going to be hugely impactful in a very negative way. And I'll also reiterate what Jeff Edgers said, that the PRD, while it wasn't perfect, it certainly had more going for it for the town than this subdivision. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Is there a definition of wildlife corridor in anything? I mean, I think there's probably okay. All right, but so we want to make sure that we consider that. Thank you.
So I don't believe the term wildlife corridor is used within the subdivision rules and regulations. I think the terminologies that are used are natural habitat. But I will I've written that down, and I will look into that further.
Okay, thank you for the distinction. Could you please promote John Cooley to panelists? John, when you get the invitation to unmute yourself and show your video, please state your name and address for the record.
John Cooley, 80 Highland. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hey, I think I mostly agree with a lot of the comments that have been raised about environmental protection, tree preservation, nature and wildlife preservation. I can't speak to my own list of regulations, but I can say qualitatively as a resident and you know, a father of 2 children who are going to school right there, and who walk up and down that street, that this plan seems high impact is polite, in my opinion. I mean, this is unreasonable. You can't clear cut that much land in a town where it's difficult to move your garage 6 inches. There's no reasonable plan for moving that much dirt in and out of that area. There's no way to argue that removing that many trees is reasonable from any perspective. I agree with all of those points. I think that if there could be a compromise, we should try to reach it, but this plan is untenable for me as a homeowner and a parent.
Thank you. Michael Amster, could you promote him? When you get the invite to unmute, please unmute yourself. You should be able to unmute yourself and speak now.
Okay. How's this?
Yes, we can hear you.
I've been electronically challenged for a while, so I do the best I can. Michael Amster, 44 Prairie Street. I went over to the site today and took some pictures of what I saw. And what worries me is that we've got two building sites already in progress, and I worry about the behavior of the contractors. They say they're going to do this and they're going to do that, and when it starts happening, oh gee, they were supposed to do that, they should have known, and that's a problem to me, and it should be a problem to all of us. I went over there today. The site was unoccupied. There were no barricades or no trespassing signs, and there was perfect entire access to anybody who wanted to just walk on the site and jump on one of the earth-moving pieces of equipment. This is a main thoroughfare, and there was easy access to heavy equipment. I didn't want to get myself trespassed, but I don't know whether the power, the keys for that equipment were still in place or not. And I worry that this is really an attractive nuisance for all these children who are walking back and forth to school. There's also on the road that comes into Main Street down to the left, there's a large branch that is hanging off a tree that is also right over a number of electric wires, and I worry there that this needs to be removed carefully, otherwise somebody's going to get seriously hurt. There's also a dumpster staged in the street, which cuts down the width of the street by about a third, and it could be a hazard to people who are coming down Highland towards Main Street. And well, okay. Goes about it, but I worry that what's going to happen here is people are going to get hurt because the people who are the contractors are just not paying attention. And it sounds to me, I haven't heard about this 6:30 in the morning stuff, but it's consistent with this, and there needs to be incredible oversight because it is possible to do something like this without somebody getting hurt if you pay attention to the rules.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. I see about 5 more hands up. And I appreciate that everybody is raising different points as they go and just agreeing if they're agreeing. And thank you each for stating your point concisely. Can you promote Anna Willis? And Anna, when you're able to unmute, state your name and address, please. Oh,
but I'll first address the question. So the construction of individual single-family dwelling lots is under the purview of the building commissioner and the fire department as far as safety rules and regulations. For projects such as this subdivision and other larger commercial projects, there's a standard procedure that if the project is approved, one of the conditions of approval is that they submit a construction sequencing and site safety plan prior to any earthwork. And that's reviewed by various town staff and implemented prior to any earthwork being commenced. So for a project of this nature, there would be a site safety plan required.
thank you. We can see you. Can you unmute yourself? Okay. Look on the bottom left or even in your.
Okay, hi. I'm Anna Willis. I live at 99 Highland Street. I'm a direct abutter. And I'm quite horrified actually when I hear the term 6,000 dump trucks, diesel dump trucks. Obviously I am because I'm a abutter, but also for the whole community. It just seems an egregious act, and according to Burton and certain, sets of the law, the bylaws, it would be really interesting to me to see how this development, as it is proposed now, could be justified, as the topography clearly is not suitable. Even the grade is, according to Burton, the grade that they're talking about bringing it down to isn't even enough to, if I'm correct, to reach the requirements of fire and ambulance. I just think it's crazy, particularly for this number of houses, and I can't see any possible benefit to the town. I'm concerned from an environmental point of view. Our neighbours next door, Christina Scherer, who just made an important point to me, on us as a family, is the wildlife corridor. And also we are parents of 2 children that also are breathing this in, the emissions, and it's just frankly nasty. I accept that there's probably going to be a development there, but I cannot see any justification for this development as it's planned.
Thank
And
you.
if I may have misspoken. They do meet the grade that's required for the fire trucks. My point was that it was pretty much, they were getting a 7% grade, and that fire trucks can't go more than 7%. So they were kind of maxing it out, but they do meet it.
Misunderstanding.
Yeah, just in case I misspoke.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. If you would, Elizabeth, promote Sharon to panelist, and then I see a few more hands going up. I just want to remind folks, if you have something new to add, we would like to hear it. Thank you for keeping your comments concise. I think I saw. Can you unmute yourself, Sharon? There you are.
Can you hear me now? Great. Thank you. My name is Sharon McGregor. I'm at 70 Williams Road in Concord. And I just want to say I support very strongly all the comments that have been made about the severity of the impacts from this development. I won't repeat any of them, but It's truly astonishing and very worrisome that there is a proposal like this before the town. And I really applaud everything that the planning board is doing and the town with the sustainability principles, the climate action and resilience plan. You know, we're doing so much as a community to really try to promote responsible development and conservation in the community. And I would hope that we would begin to see a lot more proposals coming through that really respect what the town is trying to do and be environmentally and ecologically. So I hope that the property owner, the developer, can rethink and come up with some alternatives that are going to be something that we can have in our town and fits with the character and the conservation ethic in our community. And I just want to say, you may not be aware, there's been a year-long effort, which I've been a part, working with the state on a Healthy Soils Action Plan. This is a project that's been commissioned by Environmental Secretary Theo Herides and Governor Baker. And it's a plan to promote the protection and restoration of healthy soils in Massachusetts. The state is considering new policies that will incentivize development that goes lightly on the land, protecting soils, trees, biodiversity, and hydrology. They're looking at strong actions, including implementing a minimum impact restorative development education program, leading to regulatory requirements for new developments. This would include developments having to possibly meet net carbon sink requirements, where carbon drawdown exceeds carbon emissions. So to be a net carbon sink, as far as a particular site or a community, you want soils and trees to be preserved. So this development proposal really flies in the face of new directions that the state and by extension communities will be heading, and Concord is already doing. We live in a different world now, and there really can be no more full all-out destruction of land for outside private gain at the expense of human and environmental health. So I encourage everybody involved to look at the Healthy Soils Action Plan when it is released, probably at the end of this month in early October. And I think it's entirely consistent with what we need to see happening in Concord. And I'd be happy to, if anyone has any questions about that, I'd be happy to talk about that and see if we can begin to implement that plan as soon as it's out.
Thank you, Ms. McGregor, and thanks for your work on that.
Thank you.
Can you promote Ms. Miller to panelist next, please?
I'm Janet Miller, 1647 Main Street. I don't want to reiterate everything, but I certainly totally agree with the points made about the excessive soil removal and the tree removal. One point I wanted to make was that of the trees that the developer did leave behind on the property is something that doesn't have any foliage for about 50, 60 feet. And then there's this pathetic little bunch of leaves at the top. I'm not even sure that it's going to survive on its own. And I want to know whether I mean, there were several nice trees there which were removed. I want to know what trees are going to be planted to replace that and what caliber. The other thing I wanted to say is about the safety on the road. Scott Richardson said that he bicycled daily to his office in Maynard. I bicycle along that road too. Kids bicycle along there. Having that number of trucks is not going to be safe. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe your first question was about the existing construction, correct?
First question was yes, about the tree removal or the tree that was left behind.
Yeah.
In the existing.
And unfortunately, those two sites are not part of this subdivision and the discussion. So, and I don't know, Elizabeth, if there are plans on the website that Ms. Miller could look at that would show potential tree plantings for those two properties.
They are not on the website, but if she wants to send myself or include the two admin assistants in the planning division, Nancy Hauser and Heather Carey, send us an email. We may be able to get the electronic version of the tree removal permit and the plans for those lots, and we can email them to her. But those are located in the building inspection division.
Well, also just to clarify that the definitive subdivision plan does show the location of proposed street trees. So there are at least those shown, but the other trees on the proposed lots that would be planted, those, as far as I understand it, are not shown.
For what we're talking about right now, for the subdivision.
On the definitive subdivision plan, only the street trees are currently shown as far as I can see.
Yeah, just one of those street trees. It's not attractive and it's probably not viable.
Thank you. So there's a few other comments to be made, and I appreciate people doing that quickly. If you could promote Brian Burt. If you've already spoken, I'm going to ask you perhaps to hold your comment. We will be deliberating again at a future meeting. And if there's something new that we haven't heard yet, yes, we'd like to hear it. But in the interest of hearing our next item as well, we'd like to make sure we're hearing new comments. Thank you. Mr. Burt?
Yeah, hi, this is Brian Burt, 97 Highland Street, direct abutter, also husband of Christina, who spoke earlier. We've been had some experience with this developer, with these sites right across the street from our house, and with the other two sites that they've basically clear cut. And I realize they will have to file a site safety plan and so forth. But from our experience so far, they seem to be either, this developer and the current applicant seems to be either unwilling or unable to control its contractors in terms of following the health and safety protocols put forward by the Commonwealth and by the town regarding COVID-19. And we've had to call the health department a number of times and email town officials to try to get compliance, but there's been practically no supervision from Symes with these contractors to get them to comply with these health and safety protocols. And I would like the board to consider that if something is approved for a subdivision, that there be some sort of special provisions in there for penalties for violating the health and safety protocols. And in addition to that, I'm not so, when they say that they're going to, they have a tree plan and so forth, I think that what's apparent from the current site, where they basically removed everything and left two pathetic trees there that will eventually either be removed or will die, is that they don't seem to be interested in following the spirit of the tree bylaw. And so I don't think this developer is necessarily to be trusted to follow through on any of their plans, or to follow any of the general Concord goals with sustainability and environmental protection. So I think this should be taken into consideration when the board is considering approving this subdivision. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have Garrett next, please?
Hey, it's working. Hi, so my name is Garrett Whitney, 296 Heathsbridge Road, and I'll be brief. It's quite clear that the sense of the town, the neighborhood, is no, we don't want this. Resoundingly clear. We don't hear people speaking for it other than the developers. The process appears to be, I'll say, evolved, because I don't think anybody designed it to be so. It appears to be designed to change a no into a how. And when we want to say no, We're not asking for how. So if this plan were taken to town meeting, and I would, of course, be surprised if anybody in the development side were to risk that, but if it were taken to town meeting, I'm totally confident it would be voted down. So I asked the planning board to please act in the spirit of the community. As the presenter Jack Madigan pointed out repeatedly, we have multiple decisions by the town at town meeting, in the select board, in various boards, that would preclude this project being approved. Let's do what we say we're doing. Let's stand up for what we say we're standing up for, and say no. That's my request. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Whitney. And, just to remind, everybody listening and our board especially, we do hear the public comment, and we have to weigh that along with, our responsibility of evaluating the project and what we have against the rules and regulations. So,
I'm very grateful for your work. Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Winkler. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, Zoom decided to reboot on me. Paul Winkler, 1414 Main Street, direct abutter. And I want to again thank the board for their service. Very much appreciated Mr. Flint's comments, and applaud finding the legal standing to deny this project. It could be worse. We could get a road that dumps into Highland Street. We could get a Concord Commons style monstrosity built on the backside of the hill. Those would both be worse. But after following through the PRD process and the town not being able to see its way to approve a project that the abutters and the community liked better than this development, I, and speaking for my neighbors, urge that the town apply that same inflexibility to approving this plan, either with this board or the ZBA. Thank you.
Thank you. Lyle Slade, please. We can see you. Can you find that? There we are.
Yes. So Lyle Slade, I live at 17 Orchard Road in West Concord. I just wanted to say something about all the wildlife that's going to die as a result of this project. I mean, it's something that's kind of easy to ignore, but I mean, all the nesting birds that are in the trees that are going to come down are going to die. All the small animals like chipmunks and squirrels are going to die. And any larger animals that rely on those smaller animals for food will have to go somewhere else, and there really isn't any place close by to go to. So there's going to be a loss of a complete ecosystem and all of the animals that live on that site.
Thank you. Mr. Edgars, I think we have you back, so let's try to give you the floor one more time, please.
Hi there, how are you? 50 Highland Street, Jeff Edgars. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. I just don't know what was lost. But I just had a question. You folks had done such a wonderful job negotiating this on this PRD. We had no fossil fuel hookup. We had a park that was going to add to our neighborhood and give us a needed buffer. And we were talking about less than a third of the dirt removal, I believe, that we're dealing with here, and other things like controls over trees that we don't have. Is there any way for any sort of PRD to be revived. I'm told the developer has to present it in some way. I mean, can the town encourage that? I just think that many of us felt like the PRD was the worst bad plan, and what we're getting now is the worst plan. And if you can stop it, great. But if you can't, because it's really not an issue of philosophy, it's an issue of legality, we're really, you know, it's very depressing for us here. So that was my question. Thank you.
Okay. Right. As you mentioned, you know, we have to make sure that we're following our own bylaws in terms of our review and approval or disapproval of this particular project. And then if the developer chooses to apply for another PRD, that would be up to the developer. So thank you. I'm going to wrap up this public comment. I believe that we have heard from everyone who has, oh, Elizabeth.
I'm not sure if you did hear from Candace Nelson.
Ms. Nelson? Thank you.
Again, Candace Nelson, can you hear me?
Yes.
At 31 Center Village, I am also in a butter. I just want to say that this opportunity, this land, I'm not against it being developed, even though I'm in a butter. I am so for smart development. And I feel like this is an opportunity that the town has to step up and figure out how to get a development on that property that meets its environmental and sustainability and wildlife protection and energy efficiency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We could put ourselves on the map with this if we have the courage to get what we want and what we say our principles dictate. So I'm encouraging courage by the planning board, the zoning board, whoever else is involved. I don't know the precise jurisdictions of all the different committees and boards, but it's not anti-development, it's smart development that I want to encourage. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone who submitted thoughtful comments. We do appreciate that. I believe what we would do is continue this. Do I need a motion to continue? And then do we have a potential date? Because I know we are waiting to receive information that we are likely to receive kind of towards the end of next week, perhaps, and then there's some thorough review that needs to happen.
Yep. So the engineering staff has said they will have their comments ready by September 16th. I believe CMLP will also have their review completed by then. So I turn it back to the applicant to have a discussion with the board again, it goes to scheduling and when they submit information and whether town staff has time to review it. And so that's the discussion. So I would turn it over to the applicant to decide whether they feel how much time they need to respond to comments.
And when is your next meeting, Elizabeth?
The next meeting is the September 22nd. And then the meeting after that is October 6th.
October what?
6th.
We should continue to the 22nd.
Is that going to give you enough time, Elizabeth? When do you need the information back from the applicant in order to meet that 22nd deadline?
It depends on what they're going to be submitting. If they're just addressing things that are in my report, they submit it by the 16th. I could probably address comments that are raised in my report. If I get engineering staff's review letter and they want to reply to comments from engineering staff, there would be no time for engineering staff to review whatever additional information they submit. But if they submit stuff by the 16th, the comments raised tonight, I can try and update the report by Friday, but
I'd say it sounds safer to have it on as an agenda item on this October 6th meeting, because that way we know you can have the back and forth between the applicant and the department so that the board has all the information we need and the time we need to digest it. Can we agree on October 6th?
There's just one problem with that, Kristen, that
Okay.
at least as things stand right now, we must file our decision by October 14th.
Yep.
So that would not really give any opportunity to create a draft decision or review a draft decision.
Technically, the options are the applicant can grant a time extension, or because part of this issue is that most town staff is still working remotely. The chair has the ability to suspend that 90-day time frame.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
There are two options available.
Right, we're working in these unusual circumstances right now.
Also, the board can, schedule an additional meeting.
So the only thing I suggest is there's a lot of hair on this onion, and I think we can peel some of it away by the 22nd, so that as we move to the 6th, there's that much less to peel. Otherwise, it's going to be, things will get lost. So I think we can address a whole bunch of things for the 22nd, get you enough time, Elizabeth, and we can put that stuff to the side and focus on the remaining issues. I think that's probably the best way to do it, but it's up to the chair.
I would like to, I guess we can put it on the 6th, but we can put it on the 22nd, but we need a hard deadline for that all of the questions are answered in order to appear on the 22nd, so that the board has time to digest the report.
Yep.
I believe that we have time. If we don't have everything we need, we can talk to the applicant and push that out and change the agenda, correct? With enough notification.
No, so because this is a public hearing, the board will have to make a motion second to continue the public hearing to a date and time certain.
Okay.
So if we continue the public hearing to September 22nd, I do agree there are, some of these questions that have been raised that could be easily answered, and the applicant can provide some information by the 22nd. I do not believe so. For the people who are listening, the board will not be in a position to take a vote on the 22nd. They may be able to provide guidance on a decision that could be drafted for your meeting on the 6th. But I do think there are certain things that can be taken care of on the 22nd. And, if I were to receive things, no later than the morning of the 16th, I could amend the planner's report to include that information.
Okay, could I get a motion from someone on the board?
So, Kristen, what's
A motion to continue the public hearing until September 22nd.
I make a motion that we can continue this public hearing.
7 p.m. At 7 p.m.
Continue this public hearing to September 22nd at 7 p.m.
Seconded.
Thank you. Ms. Orvidal?
Yes.
Mr. Bosdet?
Yes.
Ms. McEnany? Can you unmute? I don't know if we have to have the audio.
Sorry about that. Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Flint?
Yes.
And there's Ms. Ferguson, yes. So thanks for getting that information to the department by the morning of the 16th, and we will see everybody again on the 22nd. And thanks for all the public comment.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. If anybody needs a quick water break, please do that while we kind of get the next agenda item set up. This is for Chase Bank. So the next item, also an exciting one, is the recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals, the application of JP Chase Morgan Bank for a special permit and site plan approval under section 7.2, 11.6, and 11.8 of the zoning bylaw to demolish the existing bank building, construct a new bank building, and perform related site improvements, including parking reconfiguration, drive-through ATM, and stormwater management updates in the floodplain Conservancy District at 1134 Main Street, parcel 3790-1. So,
Roscoe is the here for the applicant.
Thank you. Mr. Roscoe?
Good evening, folks. Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks. Good
Okay. Awkward pause.
Quiet crowd.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here tonight on behalf of Chase Bank. With me is my colleague, Caitlin Flynn. She is our lead architect for this region, and she's available to discuss any of the architectural elements that come up during our discussion. Also, in the background will be our property owner, Mr. Joe Tomeno. So he will be here to answer any questions on the property itself. Just to begin, we just want to go back and, for the benefit of those that might be listening in the audience, we've been working on this project for quite a few months now, and this is a dormant site, and it's prime for redevelopment. And our applicant has come forward with improvements that will, make this a vibrant piece to the community. They've done the due diligence, and we've done several studies to site the building and come up with the plan that we have with your assistance as well. So, we're proposing this in a much more user-friendly and environmentally sensitive way. And since we last met, I'll just cover some of the high points. Is we've met with the sustainability folks, and we've updated all of our equipment to be environmentally conscious and more sustainable with low energy consumption. And we've recently received a favorable letter from the Sustainability Committee. We've also refined our lighting design so that it's much more night skies friendly. There are some minor issues that we have to overcome in terms of our design, but I think they're reachable and attainable in the next few weeks after discussing this with the building inspection department. But it's more aligned with, the building is more aligned with the West Concord look, and we've made the building pedestrian friendly to locate it right adjacent to the intersection of Main Street and Baker Avenue. The entrance, as proposed, is about 15 feet off of the sidewalk along that street, so it's proximal to the intersection. And we've continued to sustain our design goal of reducing the overall impervious area of the project and those areas closest to sensitive environmental zones. We recently got a positive recommendation last week from the Natural Resources Commission for us to go forward to come to the planning board and then to go to the zoning board seeking site plan approval. With that and some final technical details, we'd like to get your recommendation to move forward to see the zoning board for site plan approval and a special permit for the use.
Thank you. So our plan for the board is we will ask questions of the applicant. This came before us before, so we had a chance to ask some questions. It sounds like the applicant has heard those and took some steps to address them since we last met. So we want to answer any other questions. We will open it up for public comment as well. And then if all of our questions are answered, we can take a vote tonight about those three aspects. So, let me open it up. Anybody from the board have questions for the applicant based on the proposed changes or comments?
Or if any of the board members have questions about the comments raised in my report.
Thank you. I have a question and a comment. The comment first. I think it's excellent to see a commercial building use a heat pump. I'm not sure of a precedent of that in town, and we've been told, and I suggest that that's not feasible for a commercial building, especially with a lot of glass, and so that's fantastic that that was investigated. There's an open question on the signage, 3 signs versus 2. Has that been resolved? That's my only question.
No, so the sign bylaw will only allow 2 signs. So currently the plans show 3 signs. I'm not sure on the site plan, I wasn't able to identify where the freestanding monument sign was going to be placed. But it is my recommendation that the 2 wall-mounted signs be part of this site plan approval, since that provides the actual presence of the building to each of the streets. And then if the applicant wishes to move forward with the freestanding monument sign, they would have to apply to the Board of Appeals for a sign variance, which the findings required for a sign variance are nothing like a variance under the zoning bylaw. So there's different elements that they look at when they're looking at a sign variance in a commercial district. So that option would be available to the applicant.
But our approval tonight wouldn't then approve 3 signs. That's a separate process.
So the planning board, correct, the planning board does not have the ability to issue sign variances, and the applicant hasn't applied for one.
Okay.
So the plans cannot be approved showing 3 signs.
Okay. And I forgot I had one last comment. Kristen, I just wanted to acknowledge we received a number of letters, some of which were expressed concern that the points raised weren't being reviewed or heard by the planning board. And I just want to say that we've received those. Those are on our website. I as one have read them all. And I wanted to make sure that that was acknowledged. Thank you.
Thank you. So I believe you're referring to letters from Mr. Sinney. And
I think the majority were from him, but there is 1 or 2 others, I believe, as well.
And they are on the website, they were carefully enumerated points, and we have read them, and we've been looking at our planner's report as well, and the information that we have from the NRC to make sure that we have all the information we need for tonight. Matt?
Yeah, so I guess first comment would just be to echo Burton in commending the applicant for going to an all-electric infrastructure. I mean, there's nothing in our bylaws that compels that choice, and yet it's a great show of support in the spirit of our sustainability goals as a town, and I really want to call that out. It's great. I still continue to have questions about the accounting for parking spaces. And in particular, I'm still searching for the precedent of counting parking spaces as spaces that are within the drive-through. Can you point to other projects where the drive-through area is counted as parking spaces?
I mean, that's interesting that you mentioned that, because they're customers, right? So it would be a parking space for each customer.
Yeah, no, I'm just looking for past projects where there's an accounting for parking spaces where, there's some drive-through component and those areas are considered parking. I've not heard of that before. I was trying to Google it. I was having a heck of a time. I mean, not even in our municipality, in any municipality.
So off the top of my head, I can't. I can't.
I mean, I don't see why we would be doing that if there's no precedent.
Well, so how parking is calculated is under the purview of the building commissioner. So it's his determination on how he wishes to, count
But don't parking spaces have to be
So
lined
let me
and have
finish.
dimensions?
Whether there's precedent for this, that's something that I would have to review with the building commissioner. I mean, there's not that many drive-throughs in the community. And so one I'd have to look at is how Bank of America, how the parking's calculated for Bank of America. They have a drive-through, and there's a couple of others. So, if that's a concern, I can raise that to the building commissioner and have him provide some examples of how other projects in town that have drive-throughs were calculated.
Could I speak to that?
Yes, please.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a valid point, Mr. Johnson. And I can't speak to experience in Concord, but from my discussions with the building inspector, he felt comfortable with it because part of the requirements are actually derived from the number of ATMs that you have on site. So we've cut it back so that there are a total of 3 on the site. So there's 1 remote and then 2 within the lobby. And part of the requirements come from the number of ATMs you have. So you have to have 2 spaces per ATM. So if one person is using the remote ATM, the analogy was that you got to consider that a parking spot. Other communities do have an allowance for that. I can't speak to how prevalent or analogous it is for the situation in Concord, but we've designed the site in accordance with the rules and regulations and with the benefit of the building inspector's expertise.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to increase the impervious surface of the site. And I do see that you had changed the number of ATMs to, improve the parking calculation, but I'm just thinking more about the integrity of our bylaw and really how parking spaces are designed or developed or defined. And so to me, this is just, something that when I look at the application and the report too, it just strikes me as very odd.
Yeah, and to your point, we're only taking the benefit for 1 parking space. So
that's good to know.
If that helps.
Thanks for bringing that up, Matt. Did you have other comments?
That was my main remaining comment. I mean, I continue to not be thrilled about the orientation of the building, but in other aspects, I'm okay with it. And I just do want to point out that to me, it was a bank use before. It's a bank use now. The siting is improved. The condition of the building will be improved. The sustainability nature of the project seems to be better. The permeability, impermeable surface seems to be improved, though that needs to be verified. And so, overall, it's not, to me, a particularly controversial project. And that unlike some other types of projects like the conversion of Chapter 61B land, we don't have any provision for the town to do a first right of refusal or anything like that. I mean, this is going from one use to the same use. It's just simply a new project for the same type of building.
Thanks. I think that that clarification is important for, folks that are listening on the line, because some of the comments that we've had are about the use. And as you stated, there's allowed uses. This is one of them. The bank is allowed use. And there are suggested improvements according to what we've been reading. So thanks for listing those out as well.
And then I should also just mention that while I have not been yet sworn in as a select board member, I have been attending every select board meeting, and I've not been aware of any eminent domain discussions relating to this site. Perhaps there was a response to a letter saying, hey, we'll get back to you, but there haven't been any discussions among the board. And I don't believe that we've had, an executive session which I would not have been able to attend, but that would have been on this topic in that time frame.
Okay, thank you. That does speak to a concern that was brought up in a letter. What about from Haley, Nathan, or Kate? Do you have comments or questions about Elizabeth's report? Nathan?
I would just say, one of the comments that I made, and I know a number of residents made at the time during the last meeting over this, was just the aesthetic of the building and how similar it was to the TD Bank across the street, and how, both sort of have this, the characteristic of everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And so I don't think there's really been any change to the style or the renderings, really, other than I think they added the words Chase to the rendering. So I didn't know if there was going to be any other development on the exterior design or anything like that.
Mr. Roscoe?
Yeah, I can have Caitlin chime in, but basically we added some refinements to make the building elevation views, more realistic based upon our current level of planning. Where this is a one-off design, we were reluctant to start the actual building design until we had, a comfortable feeling that this project was going to move ahead. So we've started that process. So we've shown the elevation views as we proceed them, to be when complete. So we added some screening on the roof in the event that there are roof units that are visible. We've added some of the lighting elements and clarified whether an item is a light or a security camera or some other feature. So all of those elements have been added, and if Caitlin wants to chime in, please go ahead, Caitlin.
Hi, yeah, this is Caitlin. So it was kind of my understanding and Chase's understanding that although you guys had comments that the Chase building did look similar to the TD Bank across the street, that there were no official objectives or requests to ask us to change any of the materials or facades of the building at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, so just by the nature of what they are, they will look similar. And we are, again, trying to mimic the Concord style. So, you're going to end up with similarities, but hopefully the Chase product will define itself.
But in addition, if there are specific requirements or specific architectural elements that are requested to be changed or updated, that is something we can certainly take back to the client and talk to Chase about, updating any of the architectural features that you guys see fit.
Well, I imagine you're working with the West Concord design guidelines, which are, which would be that they're not requirements, they're guidelines. And then the feedback that people have had has been to make it distinct from the adjacent building. So a combination of those things while still maintaining, your brand, I suppose.
Yes, we're taking those to heart.
Other questions or comments from the board? I'm going to open it up to public comment in a moment. Elizabeth?
To that aspect, as far as the architectural details, should the board move forward, make a recommendation for approval, they can provide a condition that allows for some flexibility, or to make a recommendation that further architectural detail changes and changes to materials to make the building more distinct and different from the TD Bank building and I'd have to think about how to word this to the Board of Appeals, but allow those changes upon review by either myself and the West Concord Advisory Committee, or something that provides that flexibility.
Okay, thank you for that suggestion. Nathan, would that address your comments or questions? If there was an additional condition?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we'll also, I mean, I assume we're going to hear from some residents, so we'll see how, how they feel about the current arrangement or current designs.
Thanks. And Elizabeth, I know that in your report, you've outlined a number of conditions, and you've also mentioned that there's some information that we're waiting to hear back. Can you just describe that again before we take public comment? We're waiting to hear a little bit of information back, but it shouldn't necessarily hinder the process, correct? Based on your understanding, what we're waiting for?
So in my report, my recommendation is that the planning board recommend approval of the special permit and the site plan upon receiving confirmation from the assistant town engineer that the applicant has addressed all of their questions raised in their September 3rd memo. And just some documentation regarding the light levels that are currently shown for under the drive-up ATM, which I'm not an expert. I understand that, but they seem excessive given the light levels for the rest of the site, or light levels we have seen for other projects, such as the Umbrella or some other projects in town. And then just the applicant provide some additional information to document that those light levels aren't excessive. And then also it was one small detail that the architect can just, there's 4 sides to the building, and on the northern side, there's just an overflow roof scupper that if the roof drains were to overflow, it would flow down the building and go across the walkway. So the architect would just have to look on the other 3 sides of the building for an opportunity for that overflow. But upon receiving that information and just to clarify those last remaining questions, the rest of my recommendation includes recommended conditions of approval. Most of them are standard conditions. Some of the conditions regarding the lighting plan deal with the current lighting plan and some of the notes that I feel need to be changed to make it consistent with the standards that Concord has utilized for other commercial buildings. And then lastly, whether the board wishes to incorporate a condition regarding additional architectural detail or material changes to the elevations of the building.
Thank you. Could I just ask the applicant to tell us kind of what your plan is to address those conditions? Were there any questions or comments that you think you're going to go back and forth about, or were you planning to kind of accept those recommendations for changes, particularly about the lighting?
Yeah, we've seen the draft report, and we are in agreement with all of the conditions laid out in the document. Hopefully there's not a lot of back and forth. There's just addressing and resubmittal, and keep the departments happy. They're not, none of the conditions are too time consuming or expensive to address. So yeah, we're pleased with the draft.
Were there any proposed changes or conditions that conflicted with what you understand to be able to be due based on the brand?
No, and I'll just reiterate that our proposal, and especially in terms of signage, I think we are foregoing the pylon sign, but any decision that you might render, we would not be in conflict with any of the signage codes. So even though we might show a Chase sign on both facades, at this point, is our intent that all the signs be meeting the sign code. So you wouldn't be approving anything that would require a variance. We would come in separately if we were to pursue that.
Okay, thank you.
So Kristen, if I may,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt, on this design thing, because I don't think we've really provided much direction, but maybe trying to pull some out. I think Matt had talked about the alignment of the building, and we've received public comment in letter form from Ann Sussman talking about the Main Street facade not looking like a Main Street building. And I think the takeaway from those things is that, and looking at the architectural at the elevation drawings, I would agree that it looks like the side of a building as it is, but it faces our main street on our main commercial way. And I would also be concerned if those windows were really just being used not as windows into the building, but as panels of light or displays, as is often the case in commercial buildings that don't, I mean, they display out onto the street, but they don't interact with the street. So if there were design changes that made that side of the building on Main Street appear more like a facade that is responding to the buildings across the street, the Dino's Pizzeria, or the designs of the rest of the fronts, the Main Street fronts of West Concord buildings, I think that would be responsive. Maybe Matt, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but looking at Ann Sussman's letter, for example, I think she said you don't need a door for it to feel like a facade facing your Main Street, but it should feel like a Main Street facade. So maybe that gives a little bit more direction. Nathan, you raised the point. Matthew, Matt, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe that's something that the applicant can respond to if they're considering any changes. Thanks.
I mean, I think it could even be incidental details. It wouldn't take much to give a face to that side of the building that would make you feel like, oh, I'm on Main Street. I'm looking at the front, quote unquote, of a building, even though you enter through the side, in effect. I guess that's just that's just the one remaining point, and it's the one point that's left from the West Concord Advisory Committee report, which was their letter was favorable, and they the other point they brought up on sustainability, the applicant has met, which is great, and so I think that it's the only thing kind of left.
Yeah, I'll just add, I don't want to start designing a bank to look like a pizza shop, but this building does echo that building across the way. The door is located in exactly the same spot. That's one thing to consider. But yeah, the takeaway we have is, to make the facade, a more colonial appearance. And, I don't think we'll have an issue presenting something that will meet with your approval.
Yeah, I don't know colonial, but it's all right.
Neo-colonial, whatever cast you want to spell on it. But yeah, I'm confident that we'll come up with something that will be pleasing.
So to Nathan Burton and Matt's point, the board's recommendation can include a direction or statement to the Board of Appeals that there be further architectural design changes to the south side facade that create more of a presence to the Main Street. But what I want to point out is that I think it's important to say, while you can make those changes, and I agree, to that facade so that there's more of a presence, I don't want there to be an impression that the applicant needs to reorientate the building or change the entrance or the walkways, because then you're getting into changing different grades or elevations, or how the building sits on the site in relation to the parking and the sidewalks, and then it gets into the stormwater drainage and the engineering side of the floodplain compensatory storage calculations. And so it kind of goes down a path that just makes the whole project have to be almost basically redesigned. So I think the board can easily include a recommendation that additional design elements and design facade changes to that south side so that there's more of a presence to Main Street. That can be part of your recommendation.
Understood, Elizabeth. Thank you for the clarification, and that would be my intention. And the wording of the recommendation, of the proposed recommendation to the ZBA was along the lines of what I was thinking. I don't think at this point changing the orientation of the building certainly wasn't my point. It was that making it feel more like the front of a building, which I think you can do even if people aren't walking into it. I mean, after all, most people walk into their houses through the garage, but there's a front door, you know, there's a front to their house. And so that would be my goal. Thank you.
I've also been reminded by somebody who's been around much longer than I have, that for the TD Bank project, they were required to provide a photometrics plan as well before and after. So I will be in the office Friday morning and can review those plans as it relates to their drive-up ATM.
Photometrics being the amount of light?
Yes.
Is that what it means?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's open it up to public comment. If you have a question, please use the raise hand function or *6 on your phone. We will unmute you so that you can speak. I don't see any hands up right now, so let's take a minute to give people a chance.
I was another comment, I think, from Burton's comment is depending on how that Main Street facade changes. A comment Burton made was with all of that glass and it becoming this element of marketing. There are a lot of businesses that put posters, basically posters in the windows. So that's not something that's regulated by, that I'm aware of by our sign bylaw, but changing those windows would help keep that type of use of those windows down to a minimum.
Yeah, and I think the West Concord design guidelines actually may speak to that a little bit, because I know that there's been concerns about some of the businesses that are essentially using their storefronts as a display space, but they're not actually a commercial shop. So it might not be directly on point, but I think in the spirit of the West Concord design guidelines, using windows like that as a relatively dead space that's used for advertising, as opposed to seeing into a living building with people in it, is something that would be nice to see reflected in the design and use.
Interesting. Thank you. I'm seeing no hands raised. So no other question. Means we've kind of heard through the feedback from the West Concord Advisory Committee, and we've heard through the letters that we've received. And I believe that the applicant has had a chance to address those concerns, and the Natural Resources Commission has been working on their end and addressing those concerns as well. So if there are no other questions, I would entertain a motion from the board.
Kristen, I think it's important that the board just quickly goes through at least the points where the board's required to make their recommendation. For the floodplain, the engineering division, has reviewed the floodplain calculations and has confirmed that the project is providing the compensatory storage, and that the board's recommendation be to grant the project with the conditions of approval that have been incorporated into this report. And then as far as the site plan criteria, whether the board feels that the statements I made in this report accurately reflect what the board wants to do moving forward as far as your
Okay.
finding
So,
recommendation.
yep. So on the planner's report, bottom of page 2 to page 3 is about the floodplain conservancy district. And those were, and Elizabeth has highlighted some of it to draw it to our attention. Was everybody able to read that, and were there questions for Elizabeth or for the applicant about that section? That is one of the sections that we approve, but also the Natural Resources Commission sends in a separate recommendation.
I didn't have any questions on, I think that on the compensatory storage, the condition is, as Elizabeth stated, that the removal and the fill is in accordance with the plan, right, Elizabeth? With respect to the site plan evaluations, I guess there's the point that was raised on the design, but on the sign piece, I think, would it be helpful, Elizabeth, to clarify that that it would be approved subject to compliance with the existing sign bylaw? Because I wasn't exactly clear from your memo, and this is my lack of knowledge, not the clarity of your memo, whether our approval would in any way allow that. And I know you just said it doesn't to allow that they still need that variance, but there's that point. And then lastly, I think, there's a discussion on lighting. And I think that it would be good to clarify that the interior and vestibule and ATM lighting meets the lighting and the dark sky requirements.
Great, can we do that one at a time? So your first one, I think, is about the top of page 6.
Sorry, I was trying to go quick.
No, that's all right. I just want to make sure we don't skip them because they're good points. Yep. So top of page 6 about the relationship of structures and open spaces to the natural landscape, existing buildings, and other community assets in the area, and compliance with other requirements of this bylaw. And then we talked a little bit about that, about the character of the site, and also we mentioned that it reduces the overall amount of impervious coverage of the site. But then we talk about her highlighted part talks about the sign bylaw. Yes.
And she makes the recommendation for the building sites over a freestanding pylon sign. I guess the condition would be that the plans show two signs, or the signs, the plans as approved should show 2 signs, not 3, right, Elizabeth?
Correct.
Yep.
Okay, so the plans need to be amended. So you've got conditions about modifying condition 20. Do we need a different condition besides that one, or is that the one we're talking about?
Condition 20.
Very comprehensive conditions.
So condition 20 is prior to the issuance of a sign permit, the applicant shall modify the plans to delete the freestanding pylon sign. What I can do is I can say, or receive a sign variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals.
I think that's sufficient.
Anyone else comment?
Are we not going to bother with the parking space definition?
Great, just haven't gotten to that one.
I'm not sure how to address that question, Matt, because I mean the building commissioner is the one that is the zoning compliant officer and the person who interprets the zoning bylaw and the requirements. So how he is calculating the parking is that for each ATM, it's required to have 2 parking spaces. And for a drive-up ATM, he's counting the 2 spaces in the drive-up ATM for that ATM. So somebody is not going to park in the parking lot and walk up to the drive-up ATM. So I think that's his reasoning for those 2 spaces counting for that ATM.
Yeah, I just don't think of that as parking. I think of that as standing, or,
Well, but at the same time, why does a drive-up ATM have add to the parking requirement? Right?
I don't know why. But the thing is, I just don't know of any guidance. That's all. I'm just looking for guidance, you know.
Yeah, I would say the same logic that says that a drive-up ATM requires a parking space, which suggests that you could count the lane for the drive-up where the vehicle would be located as a parking space. I mean, and I guess if the expert who has to interpret the zoning bylaw how it applies thinks it meets, and the alternative is that we increase the impervious surface, given the concerns that have been raised about the impervious surface calculations, I would be much more inclined to say let's not expand the parking requirement.
So Matt, can you live with, I mean, I don't think we want to define, make any kind of definition for parking space in the conditions or in the report. So can you live with it as it is and the building commissioner's understanding of what's acceptable here?
Well, I was just trying to look at our rules and regs, right? We have traffic, parking, and pedestrian rules and regs. So, you know, just trying to see if how we define a parking spot is covered. That's all.
Did you find that?
Not yet. Nope.
Okay. All right. So hold on. We might be able to come back to that then. But I do think I hear what you're saying about trying to make sure this is consistently applied. But it seems like the consistency would come from the building department, who is applying kind of the same determination throughout. But while you're looking for that, we're right now going through the planner's report for the in the site plan review. In the site plan review section 11.8. And we just talked about section A. B is about the convenience and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movement. So we're talking there about movement. Were there any questions or comments about traffic flow? Elizabeth did mention about the roof drain scupper on the north side, and then that's going to appear I believe in a condition, so that can be relocated. Any other comments about letter B? Okay. Adequacy of the methods of disposal of refuse and other wastes resulting from the uses permitted on the site. I'm on letter C now. There is no major comments there. There's a dumpster on site. And then D is what we've been talking about parking and adequacy of the arrangement of parking and loading spaces in relation to the proposed uses of the premises. So let's just understand if we need to make any changes, or if you're suggesting any changes, Matt, or if you want to add any language to the report that gets more specific.
I mean, I can add, the building commissioner's determination. The zoning bylaw requires 2 parking spaces for each ATM and has counted for the drive-up ATM the availability for 2 cars to be at the drive-up ATM as meeting the requirements for those 2 spaces for the drive-up ATM. I mean, that's his determination.
It's actually a single space. Yeah.
So that should be the justification, Matt, that we can point to, don't you think?
Yeah, I don't see any other, I mean, I was just looking at whether there was something explicit in the bylaw. That it turns out the other document doesn't include any language that I could find. So I haven't found anything yet.
Would you recommend that Elizabeth change the language, or Or do you think as it is, it's clear enough?
No, I mean, I'll add his determination regarding those spaces for the drive-up ATM.
Okay. Then we've got E, adequacy of the method of exterior lighting for convenience, safety, and security within the site and for protection of neighboring properties, roadways, and the night sky. And this is what we heard from a little bit, that that you've received revised lighting plans, but there's still some questions about timing to be answered, and that's in the conditions.
So there's quite a few things with the lighting plan, but I think all of them I have addressed as recommended, so a recommendation that the Board of Appeals get additional information from the IESNA, so what is that, Illumination and Engineering Society of North America, about the light levels at the drive-up ATM. But before the Board of Appeals meeting, I will also pull the plans, before and after plans for the TD Bank lighting plans and their drive-up ATM. That will be easier and to get and more relevant, I would say, to the site. And then all the other items are things that I think I've adequately addressed as recommended conditions of approval.
Okay, thank you. Could I interrupt you for a minute? Could you promote Kate McEnany? She had to come back in. Can you promote her back to panelist, please?
Yep.
Thank you. Questions, comments on lighting? Because again, as she mentioned, there was quite a few statements attached to that. Okay. Relationship of structures and open spaces. We talked about this a bit. To the natural landscape, existing buildings and other community assets in the area in compliance with other requirements. We talked about, and with the sign bylaw, we've addressed that. Impact on the town's resources, including the effect of the town's water supply and distribution system, sewage collection and treatment, fire protection, and streets.
For item, for item F, I will add the reference for the planning board's recommendation about further changes to the architectural details in the facade on the south side.
Okay.
Just so add in the finding as well as a condition.
Okay, thank you. Did we have any recommendations for changes? We did not discuss impact on town's resources because primarily there were discussions about location of stop signs, approval of right-of-way permit, and things like that. Other things that we need to discuss or look more closely at in that aspect? So that's pretty clearly spelled out. And letter H, in terms of incorporation of sustainability and resiliency principles, again, we appreciate that you did take that to heart. And I do hope that's an example for other commercial buildings, and that it's certainly an example for future development in our town. So thank you. And I hope, I mean, I don't know if you guys will ever do this, but if you ever do, look at your energy usage and publicize what a success story it is, we'd be curious about that. And I think she mentioned it there, Elizabeth said, about building envelope and insulation and air sealing. So I don't know that you explicitly have to call that out to your builder. Let's hope not. Let's hope that is the first thing that's done, but I think it is worth noting.
We'll do it if it's a condition.
Okay, interesting. Well, I mean, and the reason I say that is because I can't imagine these days somebody, I don't want to say skimping, that's not the right word, but somebody not doing kind of the best they can with insulation in terms of the long-term savings and the return on investment. That's all.
Yeah, a little tongue in cheek, but yeah, no, if there's groundbreaking energy savings, I'm sure it'll get published.
Oh, right. That I don't know. So that concludes the section for,
Well, just on that point, a little bit more seriously, you know, heat pumps, they've come a long way, but they work best in concert with a adequately designed building envelope. Somebody that heats their house with a heat pump, I get to stand in front of my triple glazed windows and laugh at the cold in the winter because it does not come through my walls, and I have 14-inch insulated walls. And the heat pump works great in concert with that. If you have a large commercial display window that is double pane, your heat pump will aggravate your tenant. So it does take, it does take a big full picture approach, and the heat pump can't just be one concession to energy efficiency. I'll get back off my soapbox and we can continue. Thank you.
it's a good one. All right, so that is the section about site plan review. So we went through all that. We've made a handful of changes that Elizabeth's taken notes on. We've looked at the first part, which is floodplain conservancy district, and then the third part of it was the special permit 11.6 required for the demolition and reconstruction of the structure within this floodplain conservancy district. And so we are making a recommendation on that as well. And again, that the National Resource Commission is also making their recommendation. And we have received information from their meeting on the 2nd, I believe. So now, still seeing no hands up and having scared off most of the participants that were remaining on the line, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Make a recommendation, right, to approve.
Recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals that the special permit and site plan for Chase Bank at 1134 Main Street be approved based on the recommendations, findings, recommendations, and conditions of approval as outlined in the planner's report.
Anybody want to hit that one off the tee?
So Matt moved. Is there a second?
I second that.
Mr. Flint seconds. All right, Ms. McEnany.
Yes.
Mr. Bosdet.
Yes.
Ms. Orvidal. You might have to unmute. I can see it.
Go ahead and say yes, Haley. Or just go yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
And Mr. Flint.
Yes.
And this is Ms. Ferguson, yes.
And is there a board member that would like to review the letter before it goes to the Board of Appeals on Thursday, or?
Kind of feels like Matt should do it as his outgoing duty. No, I'm just kidding. I know you have enough to do with your transition, so. If Mr. Flint doesn't want to do it, I can do it.
This is going Thursday, so that means review tomorrow. Is that right?
You will have it tomorrow.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll take one for the team.
Oh, much appreciated. Thank you. And thanks to the applicant. I appreciate you being here and listening to the public comment and working to hopefully make a nice addition to that space and improving it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a team effort. So, not our first rodeo. So, we make more friends by working together than we do by being at loggerheads. So everybody involved has made this a better project. So thank you very much.
Great. All right. We have come to the part of our evening where we are on the administrative portion. And administrative business, I think we have a couple of A&Rs and then general public comment. Elizabeth, are you sharing your screen for the A&Rs?
Good night, folks.
Good night. Thank you. You're excused.
Yes, I will. So So I believe the first one is that the cottage in Old
The
Marlboro?
first one on our agenda says 1638 Center Village Drive.
This is up. Let's do this one.
But does it matter which one? Okay.
So can everybody see the plan?
Yes.
So for Center Village, so this is Center Village and Main Street, 1530 is right here. This is the portion of Center Village that's being conveyed to 1530 as part of a legal settlement. The Zoning Board of Appeals did issue a special permit to amend the PRD to allow this area to be removed from the common open space for Center Village. And that recording information is referenced on the plan down here in the bottom. So for Center Village, this plan just shows the conveyance, which changes the size and shape of the lots in a manner, but that does not affect the frontage for the lot. So it's my recommendation that the board move to endorse the plan.
Matt?
Yeah, so question is just a procedural question. I mean, the planning board is typically involved in making recommendation to ZBA about PRDs. I wasn't familiar that they could then be modified without consultation with the planning board. I guess that's a provision of the bylaw?
So it's a provision of the special permit. It's similar to provision conditions that the planning board puts on definitive subdivision plans, that the Board of Appeals has the ability to modify or amend their decision. And I don't know the exact wording, but they have the ability to modify and amend decisions without requiring a public hearing.
Okay, and without any additional recommendation from the planning board.
Correct. So long as it doesn't, it doesn't materially change the impacts or other items of the project. So that was the avenue that the Board of Appeals did to amend to allow that this small portion be excluded from the common area.
Yeah, I guess it just strikes me as odd given that, PRDs tend to be very tight in their design and that, every inch counts. So the idea that you could just carve this out without having any impact seems strange, but I guess it's up to the ZBA, not us. I just think that's unusual.
Elizabeth, just for our information, does that mean the ZBA likely looked and made sure that with this reduction in open space that it still meets the PRD requirement?
Yes.
Okay. And this was common open space, but not public common. Correct. Okay. I'd make a motion that we approve the approval not required. What's that?
Move to endorse.
Endorse.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. I move that we endorse the approval not required plan number 20-10 for 16-38 Center Village Drive, parcel 2397-16-32, and hang on, I got to close the window, and 1530 Main Street, parcel 2399 as
look down to the yellow.
As approval not required because the plan is not a subdivision, because it shows a proposed conveyance which changes the size and shape of the lots in such a manner that frontage is not affected, and authorize the chair, clerk, or town planner to endorse the plan.
I would suggest amending to include Nicholas and Brianne Carter.
I would second that.
And then did I hear Nathan second the entire motion?
Yes.
So Nathan seconded. Ms. McEnany?
I third.
Ms. Orbital?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Ms. Orvidal, Mr. Flint,
Yes.
Mr. Bosdet,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Ferguson, yes. So we got one more A&R.
So this A&R is located at the corner of Cottage and Old Marlboro. The proposal shows, can everybody see this? Is that, again, I need glasses. 344 Old Marlboro is conveying this thin strip, approximately 684 square feet, to the adjacent lot at 129 Cottage. It's in the Residence C Zone District, which requires, oh, dang it, which requires 80 feet of frontage and 10,000 square feet of lot area. Both of these lots would conform to that requirement.
And so Elizabeth, just because I want to sound smart, because I was reading the zoning code and I asked you about this. What I was asking about was that interpretation where you measure the lot area, but you've got to exclude the odd pointy sticky outy parts and this lot D1. I thought that the calculation was if two lot lines are within 50 feet of each other and each lot line from where they join to where that 50-foot gap is greater than 50 feet, then that section would be excluded.
So how you actually have to read it is you don't measure the 50 feet, you measure the length. So if, so let's say this corner, if you measure from, from here down 150 feet and measure from here 150 feet, if the distance between those two was 50 feet, then that whole area would be excluded.
Oh, I read it maybe too quickly. I thought if it was great, each one was greater than 50 feet, each of those vectors was greater than 50 feet, then you would measure that. And I thought you just eyeballing it again. I didn't pull out a ruler, but it looked like you could get a 50-foot line connecting those two lot lines more than 50 feet away from the corner. What I actually don't know what you would consider the corner there, but at any rate, doing that, even if that I had read that correctly, I think at the most you'd be excluding about 2,000 square feet, which would still make it a conforming lot.
So if you measure where 50 feet is, which is going to be somewhere down here, if this length is less than 150 feet, then that area counts.
Okay.
If you measured 50 feet and the length was more than 150 feet, then it doesn't count. That's where you get that that term rat tail.
Okay, I'm sorry, I had misread it. I thought it was 50 feet, not 100.
So it's designed to keep those real skinny, skinny rat tails from counting as part of the lot.
Okay.
And Burton, please expect another pop quiz next meeting. We'll just test and see how much you really are reading.
This is what you can tell is I've finally gone and read the subdivision control. Every single one, twice.
We're gonna find out. Okay, any other questions for Elizabeth? It looks like, were they trying to make C1 a conforming lot?
That's right.
Yes.
If you want to show your screen again, I bet somebody would move to endorse this.
Which I accidentally closed up.
Oh, that one we might have somewhere. Hold on, let me see if I have it.
No, it's somewhere in here.
I thought I had it.
There you go.
No, it's not showing up. Hold on. Get it. Oh, I can make a motion.
Can you see that?
I don't see it. Does anybody else see it? But I see your memo.
I'm seeing a big
No.
black rectangle.
Yeah, so I can
Yeah.
see your memo and I say, I move that the planning board endorses the plan for Catherine May Lawrence 2003 Trust and 129 Cottage LLC dated August 3rd, 2020 as approval not required because the plan is not a subdivision because every lot has at least 80 feet of frontage on an adequate public way, and authorize the chair, clerk, or town planner to endorse the plan. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, sorry, I heard Kate. So Kate seconded. Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Orbital, Mr. Buzdet,
Yes.
Mr. Flint,
Yes.
Ms. McEnany,
Yes.
and this Ms. Ferguson, yes. Do you have any other business, any liaison reports or town planner stuff? Okay, I'm going to open it up for public comment to the hanger-oners who just might have forgotten to hang up at this point. I'm seeing no hands.
One quick public liaison report kind of point. You know, one of the things that we might be thinking about is a town acquisition of property for affordable housing. And I know the CPC is probably going to be looking at that more, and that there's a new funding mechanism that was put in place that we voted on at town meeting last year. And I just got information from sort of the CPC, I think of it as the sort of lobbying group, but that state funding should be more like 30%, between 20 and 30% of a match instead of 13%, which means in future years, starting next year, there will probably be, that probably comes out to about an extra $100,000 or more for the CPC funds that would be going towards things like affordable housing. It was just something that was going through my head today, and it's CPC related, so I thought I'd like that to you.
Excellent, thank you. Again, I want to thank Matt for sticking it out and extending his term to be with us even longer, and wish you well. Are you going to be the planning board liaison? I
am not.
Maybe
I
some
will
year.
It looks like I'm going to be the ZBA liaison.
Okay. All right. So I'm sure we will see you again. And
what do they do?
What'd you say?
I said, what do they do?
Yeah.
Town meeting this Sunday, 1 o'clock. Be there. Anything special? Are we gonna? I thought I read that we're going to be sitting together but apart somewhere. Is there going to be a big billboard? Planning board? Or do you just want us to sit wherever?
I don't know. I have not been involved in the.
I thought that I read that. Matt, are you sitting with why do you sit right in between the select board and the planning board?
No, I would be sitting with the planning board, and I have not heard the arrangement of seating for boards and committees that are, could potentially deliberate, but it does make sense that we would need to be in the vicinity of one another.
Yeah, I feel like I read somewhere that it was going to be like in the front right, but I don't know why
I mean, unless we want to start a Zoom on our phones, we could declare a meeting and,
anyway.
Well, we'll declare a meeting anyway, right? That's going to be a declared meeting, I assume, for the planning board town meeting, right?
Do I have to do anything to open it? I don't, right? I just.
No, I think it's a standard procedure that boards and committees at town meeting are
in session.
All right. Well,
we have to do.
You don't need any special quick meetings right beforehand, like sometimes happens in years past, right?
No.
I don't think this year we have any sort of pending business.
All right. Well, hopefully we will see everybody on Sunday afternoon. And it will be the town's shortest town meeting, probably.
We hope.
Well, certainly not the other ones have been too.
Your umbrellas.
Oh, yeah? Oh, yeah, it's going to be really sunny.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, thanks, Matt. Thanks, Elizabeth, for working on everything. And I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, thanks, everybody. It's been fun.
Everybody. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.